Okay. Uh, King Tusker, King Six Tusker, and the Queen who hated him. Chaddanta Jataka, number 514. The Buddha told this story while dwelling in the Jetavana with regard to a nun who was from a good family of Savatthi. One day, while listening to a sermon by the Buddha, she admired his extreme beauty of form and wondered whether she had ever been his wife. Immediately, the memory of her life as Little Grace, Chula Subhadra, consort of King Six Tusker, chaddanta, came back to her, and she laughed from joy. But on further recollecting that she had caused the great king's death, she burst into sobs and wept aloud. On seeing this, the Buddha broke into a smile. When asked by the assembly of monks why he was smiling, the Buddha said, "O monks, this young nun wept on recalling a sin she once committed against me." And saying this, the Buddha then told this story of the past. Chapter 1: Rebirth of the Bodhisatta. Once upon a time, there were 8,000 noble elephants who were able to fly through the air whenever they wished. They lived in the Himalayan mountains near a lake that was 800 miles long and 800 miles wide. Since it had 6 bays that were shaped like elephant tusks, it was called the Lake of 6 Tusks, Chaddanta. It just so happened that the king of this elephant nation had a son. He was pure white in color, with a bright red mouth and red feet. Even among these fantastic elephants, he was no ordinary elephant baby. This was not his first life or his first birth. Millions of years before, he had been a follower of the long-forgotten teaching Buddha, a fully enlightened one. He had wished with all his heart to become a Buddha just like his beloved master. He was reborn in many lives, sometimes as poor animals, sometimes as long-living gods, and sometimes as human beings. He always tried to learn from his mistakes and develop the 10 perfections, the dasa paramitas, which are energy, determination, truthfulness, wholesomeness, giving up attachment to the ordinary world, even-mindedness, wisdom, patience, generosity, and of course, loving kindness. This was so he could purify his mind and remove the 3 root causes of unwholesomeness, akusala mulas, which are craving, anger, and the delusion of a separate self, and someday replace them with the 3 purities, the Parisuddhis: non-attachment, alobha, loving kindness, adosa, and wisdom, amoha. This great being had been a humble follower of the forgotten Buddha. His goal was to gain the same enlightenment of a Buddha, the experience of complete truth. So people call him boddisatta, which means enlightenment being. No one really knows about the millions of lives lived by this great hero, but many stories have been told, including this one about a magnificent elephant. After many more rebirths, he would become the Buddha, who is remembered and loved in all the world today. When the elephant prince grew up, he reached the height of 132 feet. He was 180 feet long from trunk to tail. His trunk alone was 87 feet long and as bright and strong as a silver chain. Because he happened to have 6 tusks, he was known as tusker, chaddanta. These were gigantic, 45 feet long and 22 feet around, and they shone brilliantly in 6 colors: blue, yellow, red, white, crimson, and all the first 5 at once. After his father died, he became the new king of the 8,000 noble elephants. It is said that elephants are very intelligent, and these were more so than usual. They were even wise enough that the entire nation had come to honor and serve the 500 silent Buddhas, the Pacceka Buddhas, who also lived in the Himalayas at the time. They were called Buddhas because they were enlightened. This means that they no longer experienced themselves, the ones called I or me, as being in any way different from all life living itself. So they were able to experience life as it really is in every present moment. Being one with all life, they were filled with compassion and sympathy for the unhappiness of all beings. So they wished to teach and help them to be enlightened just as they were. But the time of our story was a most unfortunate time, a very sad time. It was a time when no one else was able to understand the truth, Dhamma, and experience life as it really is. And since these Buddhas knew this, that was why they were silent insofar as teachings go. Chapter 2: Home and Family. In the middle of the lake of 6 tusks, for a diameter of 192 miles, it was free of all plant life and as clear, clean, and bright as a magic jewel. Around this vast open center, there grew 7 circular thickets: white lilies, blue, red, and white lotuses, white and red lilies, and finally, edible white water lilies that are especially loved by elephants. Outside the 7 thickets was another circle of mixed water lilies and lotuses. Then, in elephant hip deep water, there was a circle of red rice paddy at the outer edge of the lake. Along the shore there was a thicket of different kinds of shrubs with delicate and sweet-smelling flowers that were blue, yellow, red, and white. That made a total of 10 circular thickets, each one extending outward for 16 miles. Then came a circle of bean plants, followed by circles of morning glories, cucumbers, pumpkins, squash, and other creeping plants. Then came forests of sugar cane as big as palm trees, bananas the size of elephants' tusks, sal trees, and jackfruit trees with fruits as big as water jars. There were forests of very sweet-tasting tamarinds and wood apple trees. Next was a big forest of many kinds of trees. Finally, there was a huge circle of bamboo trees. But that was not all. Surrounding the bamboo forest were 7 encircling mountains. First was Golden Mountain, 112 miles high. then Jewel Mountain, 96 miles high, Sunshine Mountain, 80 miles high, Moon Mountain, 64 miles high, Reflecting Water Mountain, 48 miles high, Big Dark Mountain, 32 miles high, and finally the outer circle called Little Dark Mountain, only 16 miles high. The highest inner Golden Mountain surrounded the lake of Six Tusks country like the rim of a gigantic golden bowl, so that the light reflecting from it made the lake shine like the young sun at dawn. At the end of the northeast tusk of the lake stood a huge banyan tree. Its trunk was 25 miles across and 112 miles high, and it had 8,000 banyan roots growing down from its branches. It was as beautiful as a mountain of jewels. On the west side of the lake of Six Tusks was a golden cave extending into Golden Mountain for 192 miles. King Six Tusker spent the spring in this cave with his entire nation of 8,000 elephants, including his 2 queens. The first was called Great Grace, Maha Subada, and the second, Little Grace, Chula Subada. The Elephant King spent the summer months under the hanging roots of the huge banyan tree, enjoying the cool breezes blowing from the lake of Six Tusks. One day, he was informed that the great forest of sal trees was in full bloom. Wishing to enjoy the beautiful fragrance of the large blossoms, he went to the blooming sal forest, followed by all the other elephants. He just so happened to bump his forehead against one of the flower-laden trees. Queen Little Grace was standing upwind, so the heavier twigs and leaves and biting red ants in their little leaf houses fell on her royal body. Queen Great Grace happened to be standing downwind. So the lighter flower petals and sweet-smelling pollen were blown onto her royal body. Because of her own ignorance, Queen Little Grace misinterpreted these events. Instead of accepting the simple fact of objects falling on her body, causing minor discomfort which passed quickly, she imagined that a self living inside her had been insulted. To defend this self-image, she automatically and immediately got angry at the great being, King Six Tusker. She thought, "He dropped dirty twigs and leaves and red ant houses on me, but on his favorite wife, the number 1 queen, he dropped lovely flower petals and sweet pollen. I'll get even with him." And she tied this anger to herself, and herself to it, determined not to let it go. A few days later, the nation of 8,000 elephants went down to bathe in the lake of Six Tusks. 2 young elephant calves took fragrant roots of asira bushes in their trunks and respectfully washed King Six Tusker. They thoroughly rubbed his thick elephant skin, a job as big as if they were washing Mount Kailasa. When they were finished and the king came out of the lake, they bathed the 2 beautiful queens in the same way. They too left the water and stood by his side. Then the entire nation of 8,000 elephants went into the lake, played in the water, picked various lotuses, and decorated their king and queens with the flowers. It just so happened that one elephant, while swimming in the lake, saw a marvelous lotus with 7 flowers, one inside the other, reaching high above the water. the lucky elephant plucked it up and offered it to King Six-Tusker. He held it in his trunk and sprinkled the sweet-smelling pollen on his forehead. Then he gave the 7-flowered lotus to his number 1 queen, Great Grace. When she saw this, Queen Little Grace thought, even this great 7-flowered lotus he gave to his more loved one, not to me. She used this thought to build up hatred, which she tied to herself and herself to it, determined not to let it go. One day, not long after, the enlightenment being mixed together sweet fruits and lotus roots, which he sprinkled with lotus nectar. This he put into the alms bowls of the 500 silent Buddhas. Meanwhile, Queen Little Grace had collected many big and little fruits, which she also gave as alms to the Buddhas. Still holding on to her hatred, she silently dedicated the blessings of her gift to her own craving for vengeance. Wishing with all her might, she thought, when this present life comes to an end, may I be reborn in the royal family of the kingdom of Mada as the Princess Grace. When I grow up, may I become the number 1 queen of the king of Benares, able to please his mind. May I become his favorite, so that I could do whatever I want. With such power, may I speak to the king and get him to send a hunter to kill this king of elephants with a poisoned arrow and bring me his tusks that shine with 6 colors. From that time on, she did not eat or drink. Soon, she became dehydrated and died. Chapter 3. The Hate-Filled Queen. Rebirth took place as Grace, daughter of the Queen of Mada. When she grew up, she married the king of Benares and became his favorite wife, the most pleasing to his mind. She came to be in charge of all the king's 16,000 wives. Remembering her previous life, Queen Grace thought, my great wish is coming true. Now I have the power to request the tusks of the Elephant King be brought to me. She rubbed medicinal oils on her skin, dressed in dirty clothes, and lay in bed as if sick. The king began asking for his favorite queen. When told she was ill, he went to her bed, massaged her back, and said, "O queen, whose body once glowed, why are you grieving? Your color has paled, and your large eyes have faded. You are like a once beautiful garland that has been crushed." She replied, "My lord, I seem to be in a nightmare with a fantastic craving that cannot be satisfied. I fear if my wish is not granted, I must die. Whatever joys and luxuries are desired in this world, I can provide," said the king. "So tell me your wish and I will grant it." "Great king, granting my wish will not be easy. First, summon all the hunters in your kingdom, and then I will tell you my fantastic craving." The king left her chamber and ordered the drums be beaten to call all the hunters. Soon they arrived, of course, bringing suitable gifts for the king. There were 60,000 of them in all. Sitting by an open window, the king told Queen Grace, "My dear queen, all the clever and fearless hunters, knowers of the forest and beasts, have come to me Whatever you want me to do for you can now be done." The queen addressed the crowd. "Hunters, listen to me well. In a dream, I have seen a certain pure white elephant with 6 magnificent tusks. It is those tusks which I crave, and if I do not get them, I will surely die." Some of the hunters answered her, "Neither we, nor our parents, nor our grandparents ever saw or heard of such an elephant with 6 tusks. Tell us, please, according to your dream, in what direction is this elephant to be found?" Queen Grace looked at all the hunters carefully. She saw one who had wide feet, calf muscles as big and round as alms bowls, large knees and ribs, a thick beard and brown stained teeth. He was the biggest of them all and was so covered with scars from old wounds that he was the ugliest too. He stood out easily in the crowd, known as Top Dog, Sonatara. Some storytellers say this was not the first lifetime in which he became an enemy of the Enlightenment being. "This big ugly one will do just fine," thought the queen. With the king's permission, she took Top Dog to the top of the 7-storied palace. She opened the northern window, pointed towards the Himalayas, and said, "There, in the north, when you have passed 7 mountains, you will come to a golden cliff full of flowers that are loved by human-headed bird beings, Kinaras. Look down from the top of that golden peak, and you will see on the other side a banyan tree as big as a green cloud, with 8,000 hanging roots. The pure white elephant king with 6 tusks is under that tree. He cannot be conquered by anybody, since he is protected by 8,000 elephants who ride on the wind to strike with their long, sharp tusks. His powerful elephant guards are angered by even a change in the wind. If they see a man, their rage blows hot air from their trunks and turns him into ashes." This was enough to frighten even Top Dog. "Your Highness," he replied, "in your royal family there is plenty of gold, silver, pearls, lapis lazuli, and precious jewels. Why do you need the ivory from those tusks? Is it really that you want that elephant killed? Or in truth, do you aim to get me killed?" "When I remember what that elephant did to me," she said, "I am filled with jealousy, and it makes my heart burn with frustration. O hunter, grant me the vengeance I crave, and 5 of the richest villages in the kingdom shall be yours." "O hunter, my friend, I have given alms to silent Buddhas and dedicated the benefit to my own greatest wish, to have that 6-tusker killed and keep his biggest pair of tusks for myself. This was not a dream, but a mighty promise that must now come to pass. By the power of that promise, go and have no fear." Top Dog agreed, saying, "As you wish, Your Majesty." "Now, please tell me where he lives exactly, and where he sleeps. What road does he take to go bathing, and where does he bathe? Tell me what you can about his lifestyle." Remembering her previous life as an elephant, she said, Very near the giant banyan tree, there is a big lake with crystal clear water and a beautiful bathing place. Flowers bloom there, served by honeybees. When the Elephant King finishes his bath, his skin is as white and pure as white lotus, and he dresses in blue lotus garlands. Happily he returns home, following his beloved Queen, Great Grace. I will kill the King Elephant, said Top Dog, and bring you his tusks. The Queen was filled with joy and gave him 1,000 gold coins. She said, now go home, and in 7 days' time be ready to begin this journey. The Queen summoned blacksmiths and told them, we need an axe, a hatchet, a shovel, a pick, a hammer, a bamboo cutter, a grass cutter, an iron staff, a saw, an iron pole, and a grappling hook. Make them quickly and bring them to me. Then she called leather workers and ordered them, we need a bag as big and strong as a water jar, ropes and straps strong enough to tie an elephant, sandals big enough to fit an elephant, and a big umbrella. Make them quickly from the strongest leather and bring them to me. After all these things were made and brought to the Queen, she added fire sticks and other necessities. She put everything in the big leather bag, making it as heavy as a huge water jar filled with water. After the week had passed, Top Dog returned and bowed before the Queen. Having the strength of 5 elephants, he tucked the heavy leather bag easily under his arm. After taking leave of the King and Queen, he left the palace, loaded up his chariot, and rode out of the city. After going through many villages and towns, he crossed the border of the kingdom of Benares. He went through vast forests, and after sending home the crowds that followed him, he arrived in the land where no people live. Chapter 4. The Hunt. Top Dog used the grass cutter to get through a jungle of grass, and the bamboo cutter for basil and reed thickets. After first piercing the biggest trees with the pick, he used the axe to chop his way through a forest. Then he made a bamboo ladder and climbed to the top of an impenetrable bamboo thicket, which he crossed by using a bamboo pole that he stretched over it. Coming to a muddy swamp, he walked over it using 2 wooden planks, one after the other, over and over again. Then he made a canoe and paddled it across a flooded area. At last he arrived at the foot of the great circle of mountains. He climbed by throwing the grappling hook and leather rope up, tying the bottom to a peg he had hammered into the mountain, and pulling himself up the rope to the hook. Then he hammered another peg into the mountain, tied it to the rope, pulled out the grappling hook, and threw it further up the slope. Hitting the rope beneath him sharply, he dislodged the lower peg, gathered it in, and pulled himself up to the hook. He repeated this over and over again until he reached the summit. He climbed down the other side by hammering the peg into the mountain and tying the leather rope to it as well as to the big leather bag. Then he sat inside the bag and lowered it downwards, just like a spider hanging by a thread from its cobweb. On the other hand, there were some places where he simply grabbed hold of the big leather umbrella and used it like a parachute to fly down like a graceful bird, or at least so it is said. After climbing up and down the first 6 mountains, he finally came to the innermost golden mountain, which just so happened to be 112 miles high. He climbed to the top and found Kinaras living there, as he had been foretold by Queen Grace. These are winged beings who look human from the waist up and bird-like from the waist down. They are innocent creatures who generally avoid talking with people, since they consider them to be mostly liars. Looking down the other side of Golden Mountain, Top Dog saw the giant banyan tree, as big as a cloud, with its 8,000 roots hanging down. He saw too the white elephant king with 6 tusks, who could not be conquered by anyone, guarded by 8,000 strong fighting elephants with sharp tusks and able to fly like the wind. Nearby he saw the great lake, filled with beautiful lotuses served by millions of bees, and he saw the path the king was accustomed to following to go for his bath. Urged on by the hateful desire for vengeance of the wicked queen, he climbed down the inner cliff face of Golden Mountain. He reached the dwelling of 6 King Tusker 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days after starting out. Top Dog thought out his plan. I will make a pit, hide inside it, shoot the Elephant King, and bring him to the end of his life. So he went into the forest, collected wood, and cut down trees to make posts. While the elephants were bathing in the lake, he dug a pit with the shovel he had brought, hiding the dug-up dirt by sprinkling it in the water. He set the posts in the bottom of the pit to support the planks, which he covered with dirt and brush, leaving only a hole the size of an arrow and an entrance for himself at the far end. At dawn, he attached a false hair bun on the top of his head like Indian holy men wear. He disguised himself further by wearing holy yellow robes. Then he hid inside the pit with his bow and poison-tipped arrow. When the enlightenment being passed by, Top Dog, with a terrible wish to kill in his heart, shot him with the poison arrow. The king elephant trumpeted a great cry of pain. All the other elephants began trumpeting just as loudly from fear, trampling grass and trees alike into powder. The 8,000 fled in 8 directions. The king was driven by his great pain into wanting to kill his attacker. He followed the line of flight of the arrow and saw the hunter hiding in the pit. Then he noticed the yellow robes, the kind worn by perfect men, whom the good would never blame. Suddenly, he said, "Whoever is stained, not having tamed his mind, and is dishonest, is not worthy of that yellow robe. But one who has cleaned his stains by concentrating his mind, and is honest and wholesome, is worthy to wear the yellow robe." By giving this teaching to his enemy, the great being blew out the fire of anger within himself. Then he asked, "My friend, why do you want to kill me? Or were you persuaded by another to kill me?" Top Dog replied, "Queen Grace, favorite of the king of Benares, and respected by the royal family, saw you in a dream. It was she who rewarded me and said, 'I want his tusks. Go and get them and bring them to me.'" Realizing this must be a deed of the reborn little Grace, the enlightenment being decided he must suffer the pain of losing his tusks for her sake. And furthermore, he thought, she doesn't want anything to do with my tusks. She wants me dead. Then he said to Top Dog, she knows that my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents' tusks have been saved by us here after their deaths. She specifically wants my tusks because her hatred makes her want me dead. All right, get started, hunter. Take your saw and cut off my tusks while I still live. Then go tell the hate-filled queen the elephant died because of them. With saw in hand, the hunter approached. But since the great elephant king was 132 feet tall, appearing to be as big as a mountain, he could not reach the tusks. Then the great being lay on the ground and bowed his head. The hunter got onto the trunk that was as bright and strong as a silver chain. He climbed up until he stood on the forehead, just as if he had conquered the peak of holy Mount Kailasa. Then he climbed down the forehead and put his foot into the mouth, stuck his knee up against the cheek, and inserted the long saw into the mouth. He began drawing the saw with both hands. The great white elephant felt severe pain as his mouth filled up with blood. The hunter shifted back and forth, but could not cut the mighty tusks. Accepting the pain, 6 tuskers spit out the blood and asked, "My friend, can't you cut it yourself?" "No, my lord," said the man. Still alert in his mind, he continued, "Then take my trunk that I am now too weak to raise and put it on the saw." After the hunter did so, the elephant helped him saw off his own tusks as easily as if they were the tender parts of a palm tree. Then the great being said, "Friend hunter, it is not because I do not like them that I give you these tusks, and neither is it because I wish for a superior birth as Mara, god of death, or Saka, king of the gods, or even as Brahma, greatest of all gods. Instead, I wish only to give the most perfect gift possible for the benefit of the unfortunate queen and all other beings." After giving his 6 tusks of 6 colors to Top Dog, he asked, "How long did it take you to get here?" "It took me 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days," he replied. "Go, my friend, you may reach Benares in 7 days by the magic of these magnificent tusks." After Top Dog was out of sight, and before Great Grace and the other elephants returned, the bodhisatta died. Then the 8,000 elephants who had fled in 8 directions returned. Along with Queen Great Grace, they saw the great corpse. They wept and cried out to the silent Buddhas, true friends of the great being, "Sirs, the one who used to give you the 4 necessities, food, clothing, shelter, and medicine, has died from a poison-soaked arrow. Come and see his dead body." All 500 silent Buddhas flew miraculously through the air and landed at the place of death. 2 strong young elephants lifted the body of their king and made it bow down respectfully to the silent Buddhas. Then they burned the body on a gigantic funeral fire. All night long, the silent Buddhas chanted in honor of the enlightenment being. The next morning, the 8,000 elephants blew out the funeral fire. Filled with grief, they wept, threw dirt on their heads, and returned to their homes, following Queen Great Grace. Chapter 5. The Victorious Queen. Even before the 7th day, Top Dog arrived in the suburbs of Benares, carrying the graceful tusks, beautiful and matchless in the world, brightening the forest with their golden radiance. He sent word ahead to the queen, "I have killed the elephant and brought you his tusks." When he got to the city, he went to Queen Grace and said, "Your Majesty, the elephant for whom your heart was filled with hatred, the one you told me to find and kill, he has indeed been killed by me. Have no doubt of the death of that elephant king, for here are his tusks." And he gave them over to her. The tusks, which were beautiful and shining with 6 colors, she received on her bejeweled fan and placed on her lap. On seeing the tusks of her husband of a previous life, she thought, "This beautiful elephant king was killed by me, for on my command Top Dog killed him with a poison-soaked arrow." With her mind focused on the great being, she suffered her full measure of pain and remorse. Unable to bear the pain of her overwhelming grief, her heart broke and she died on the very same day. This Jataka story having been told, the Buddha made the story clear by saying, "Queen Grace is today this nun. Top Dog is today Devdatta. And I, who am today the Buddha, was King Six-Tusker." At the end of the Buddha's telling of the story, many people attained the stream entrance state of mind, Sotapatti. And the nun, by spiritual insight, attained arahantship, sainthood, and freed herself from all future pain and rebirth. Thank you for listening.